Hi, friends. Welcome to Journey of a Joyful Life podcast. I'm your host, Melodie Chandler, and I'm so excited about this very first Journey of a Joyful Life podcast that we have today. I wanted to just kind of go back to the very beginning, the history of Journey of a Joyful Life, kind of explain about why we're called Journey of a Joyful Life, and kind of get caught up to where we are today. So, Journey of a Joyful Life, the name comes from the meaning of the name Melodie. And I'll talk about kind of when our organization decided to choose that name as the name of our nonprofit a little bit later on. But Journey of a Joyful Life is the meaning to the name Melodie, if you're looking at the meaning differently than the musical version of Melodie. And so that's kind of a little bit about it. I didn't really want to say Journey of Melodie's Life. Journey of a Joyful Life sounded a little bit more exciting to me. Way back, whenever I was 10 years old, I knew that the Lord called me to go to China. And I had been really sensitive to the leading of the Lord. I accepted Christ whenever I was 4 years old, and I knew that the Lord was living and breathing and that the Spirit was working from a very young age. And I'm super grateful for my parents and for other mentors and people in my life who poured into me, and just for the Lord really impressing upon my heart how important it was to live a life that was meaningful and truly devoted to the Lord. And so at 10 years old, we had a special speaker come to our church. And that day, these speakers came and their whole family was there, and they were doing work overseas in China, and their family, the children, they could all speak Mandarin, and they quoted John 3:16 in Mandarin. And when their family was on the stage speaking, talking about their work in China, and then quoting scripture, I knew at that moment, I just felt it so impressed upon my heart that the Lord wanted me to go to China. And at the end of the service, at the altar call, the oldest son, who was in his 20s, said something like, if you'd like to come and serve with us this summer in China, just come and find us at the end of the service. And I looked over at my dad and my parents and was like, I'm going to go to China. And my dad was like, no, you're not. Definitely not. You're 10. And I can remember so vividly the feeling in my heart of like, you have no idea. I feel so impressed that this is where I'm supposed to be. And seeing the looks on my parents' faces, like, why would I not be allowed to go? Of course, 10 years old, there's no way anybody's going to send their child at 10 to go overseas. But it was very much impressed upon my heart at that time. And so going forward in my life, I became a music teacher. I loved music. Very ironically, with the name Melodie, that I would love music. Music was very important to me. And I taught privately piano, violin, and voice in my home, and didn't decide to go to college right after high school. At 21, I did go to college and studied music. And my incredible violin teacher just reached out and gave me an opportunity to have a scholarship for violin, and I went to Sam Houston. During my time at Sam Houston was really pivotal for me. The Lord used that time to grow my faith a lot. My college pastor at the time, Jeff Kennan, he's so awesome. He really poured into me what it was like to really live a true Christian life, to have a relationship with the Lord and not just be a Christian. And he is somebody who will always have a deep impact on my life. And so lots of people were going on missions trips in college, and I was a part of a college Bible study at the Baptist Student Ministry and was able to lead worship at the Baptist Student Ministry. Loved that so much. Just wanted so badly to be able to go to college. To be able to go to China. I was in college. And at the end of my college time, our university orchestra took a trip to China. And I was so excited. This was my time to be able to go to China, because my parents had not really been super excited about the fact that their daughter would go off to China before that. But for this, I needed to go for my grade as the symphony uh, student. So I had the opportunity. I went. It was incredible for 10 days. We toured all over China, and I got to have my first taste of what it was like in the country. And I've looked back on those journals that I wrote during that time and just the things that I said about the food and the people and the eyes that stared back at me on the plates, and true culture shock. I really had no idea what it'd be like to be in another culture. I had been on a trip to Europe previously with the college orchestra, and very similar, lots of different things to America, but very similar to America. So Asia was a much different experience. But I knew even more at that time that the Lord really wanted me to go back and be in China. So fast forward a little bit, graduated from college, became a music teacher in the public schools. I loved my students. I taught at a couple of different districts in the area where I live, and just still had such a desire in my heart to one day go to China. But I struggled so much with, I really want to go to China, but my parents are not really for it. And how does someone follow the call that the Lord has on them and go against their parents? And it's a really long story that I'll probably make another podcast for in the future, about just how my heart was so deeply entrenched in staying under authority. Maybe not in the most balanced way, but at the time, that was all I knew. And I really didn't understand that the Lord would have me to go, but have my parents not be for it. So fast forward through lots of different tumultuous things, relationships, just things going on in my life, I really felt like the Lord was calling me to have 2 international students come and stay in my home with me. At this time, I was living by myself, and I applied through an international organization to have foreign exchange students come, and I got approved. But they didn't approve single women for 1 exchange student, so I had to have 2, which I'm so thrilled about. But I felt so torn. They send you all these applications of all these students who have applied to be international students through this exchange agency, and so I had to pick 2 kids. And I knew that I wanted to have a Chinese daughter come and live with me. I had to pick someone else from another country, and but I knew when I saw Fenya in the application, I knew she was the one that was supposed to come if she would accept me. Also, I was a single woman. I didn't have a family environment to give a student coming over, so I knew that they could also choose not to come and stay in my home. But my amazing Chinese daughter Isabella and my German daughter Fenya chose to come and live at my home for a year, and that was such an incredible experience, having a foreign exchange student in my home, 2 of them. And it was my very first opportunity to parent teenagers, which that in itself was very eye-opening. But 2 teenagers from 2 different cultures who could barely speak English coming together. Wow, it was incredible. I learned a lot. But we had such a beautiful and incredible time together, and just really pivotal memories for me that I'll always have. But during that time, I was engaged to be married, and I called off that relationship for some different reasons, and I was really feeling like I didn't know what the Lord wanted me to do with my life. I was so frustrated that these aspirations that I had to be a wife and a mother and live overseas in China, and just so many dreams that I had that I felt like were from the Lord, weren't playing out. And I was just really frustrated and crying out to the Lord, Lord, I don't know what you want from me. I feel like you've kind of left me in this space to just flounder. And right in the middle of that, I also lost my job teaching music, because in Texas at that time, they cut the music department like statewide. And so all of the music teachers and music programs in Texas had to just cut their staffing because the funding was cut. So I was the very newest hired music teacher in my school, and one of the newest in my district. And so I was going to lose my job along with other music teachers in my district that lost their jobs. And I was super sad. This was my dream school. I loved teaching music at this school. My students were amazing. I had built all these connections and relationships with them. And so again, I was like, Lord, what have you done? You've forsaken me in this time. I loved this place. I felt so cared about by the people that were around me. And I still, to this day, have relationships from that school. Um, but just really asking the Lord, like, I don't know what's going on, just being real frank with him. And I remember one night before I was going to bed, I was in my room and my Chinese daughter Isabella came in and she said, "Oh, Melodie, I have some exciting news for you." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, tell me, Isabella." It was about April, at the end of April at this time. And she said, "I got you a job in my hometown in China." And I just started laughing. I was like, "Isabella, you're so funny. Like you can't just get me a job in your hometown in China. Like that's just not how this works." And she's like, "No, no, no. You can call my foreign teacher Kirk and he can help you to know how to get a job because you can get a job teaching English in China." And I thought, "Oh my word, what in the world is she talking about?" And so she handed me this, like, she was so funny. She is still to this day so funny. I love her so much. But she had ripped off a piece of paper and written a phone number on it and handed it to me. "Just call this phone number and you can get a job." And I thought, this is the most outlandish thing I have ever done. Like, you don't just call some number of somebody you don't know. And I knew that her foreign teacher, this is what she called him, her foreign teacher Kirk, at the time was still living in China. And it definitely wasn't a Chinese phone number, and there was no way I could talk to this guy. And we had been praying for Kirk for a very long time. The whole year that she had been with me, she had told me about him and told me about um, that he worked in her school and all these different things. And I was so excited at the possibility of, what this might bring. But I was trying not to get my hopes up. And so the next day, I called the phone number. Like, what do I have to lose? And so when I called the phone number and explained to the guy on the other side of the phone, "So here's the deal. I have this foreign exchange student. She told me I should call this number. Maybe I could get a job." And he was like, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I teach. I'm a teacher, but my heart is to go to China." And she says that maybe I could be a teacher through your organization to go to China. And he was like, "Oh, well, yeah, we're an organization that sends believing teachers to China and we would love to interview you. Let's set up a time." And I was like, I can't believe that this is happening right now. And so I set up a time. They called me, had an interview, and I got the job to teach through an organization called Zhong Relations in Wuhan, China. And uh, reminding you that up to this point, my parents have been very against me moving to China. Um, just didn't think that it was the Lord's will for my life. And I I just knew it was. So I told them I had something to talk to them about, and I went to their house after school the day I found out I got the job, and I said, "So I need to tell you guys that I had this interview for a new teaching job, and it's in China, and I got the job, and so I have a job at a Chinese university in Wuhan." I was like, "I know that for all these years that you haven't been supportive of that, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is what God wants me to do. He's leading me into this, and I really want your blessing. I don't want to go there without your blessing." And I'll never forget exactly where my dad was sitting, and where my mom was sitting, and where I was sitting, and how terrified I was that they were not going to give their blessing, because I knew at that point that I was going to be obedient to the Lord. I was going to go. My dad looks over at me and he said, Melodie, I've been praying, and I've even gone to the front at church, and Pastor Jeff has been talking over and over about missions, and I know that I'm supposed to say yes. I know I'm supposed to give you my blessing and let you go. And I don't want you to go, but I'm going to give you my blessing and say that I want you to do what God wants you to do, because that is going to be the center of his will." And my dad even said, "I feel like some of the hard things that you've been through over these years is because you've honored me and been obedient to me, but it's been outside of God's will. Like, you should have been able to go before now." And you've honored me and these things are happening, and it's more to show me that I need to kind of be in check. And I was so struck. I didn't even know what to do, but I was thrilled, and we were all in tears, and my mom was in tears, and she's like, I know you're supposed to go, but I'm so sad, and I'm going to miss you, and what is this going to look like? And it was a really special time for my family, just for me personally, and for me and my parents and our relationship. Um, I was thrilled. I knew that I could go back home that evening and tell my Chinese daughter that, like, I am going to come to Wuhan and we're going to see each other in your hometown. I could not believe it. And so I was so saddened because my Isabella and Fenya were going to have to go back to their real mothers and their real homes in their own countries. But I had this hope of what the Lord was going to do whenever I moved to China. And so I spent that summer, I finished out the school year at my school, and it was incredible. I got to give prayer cards out to all my students at the school, and I even ran into one of my students recently, and she said, I still have your card after all these years. My students are all grown up now, but just the fact that she kept that card and she prayed for me, it meant so much. So saying goodbye to my students and my friends at that school, who are still my friends today, so many of them. I lived with a family for the summer, and took care of their children because the mom was working and the dad was no longer there. He had passed away. And those kids were so precious to me. They had been my students at that school, and I lived with them. And then at the end of the summer, I sold my car, and I used the money that I had raised that summer to buy my plane ticket. And I was off to Michigan. I went to Michigan for a training and then moved to Wuhan. And at that time, I thought nothing bad could happen. This is like my dream. My dreams have come true. I'm moving to China. I live in a place called Wuhan. Nobody knew where Wuhan was. Now everybody knows where Wuhan is. But at that time, that was in 2011, nobody knew where Wuhan was. And I was so excited. I could like show on my hand all the different places in China. You know, they taught me all these things, and here's Wuhan. I kind of refer to it as like the Kentucky of China or the Tennessee of China, because, you know, Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. And over here, you have Wuhan, and it's just like Texas. It's super hot. And so I was like, the Lord prepared me for this. This is where I'm supposed to be. It's like really, really hot. There's no air conditioning. And I get to teach these Chinese students English that go to this university. And I quickly met so many dear friends in Wuhan, still dear, dear friends that I have today. And it was amazing. I loved it. This was like probably still to this day, I can think back to really pivotal times in my life. And my college experience, my college years were some of the most precious memories that I have of like my older life. Like not my memories as a child, but memories as I became an adult. College was really pivotal for me. And then my first year in China, living in Wuhan, was also super pivotal for me. There were so many things I needed to talk to the Lord about and heal from that I had experienced over the last few years. A part of my heart had felt like I'd kind of run away. I was able to run away from some things that I didn't really want to deal with, that I'd been through. And all of a sudden, I was in a place where nobody knew me. I was starting completely fresh. I got to kind of reestablish who I was, who the Lord wanted me to be. And it was really incredible. It was really healing and healthy. And a very sweet couple who lived in Wuhan were living there just specifically for the care of those who were ministering to others in the city. And they cared for the foreigners that were there. And Bruce and Donna were their names, but Bruce ministered to me so much during that time. And I joined a Bible study, ironically, with foreign teacher Kirk, who became my friend, who was Isabella's teacher that she had had. And we became really good friends as well. But during that year, the Lord just, I felt so loved and cared for by the Lord. And like, wow, this was what it was like to truly live out. I thought what it was really like to really live out, just kind of like a promised land feeling, like this is where the Lord wants me to be. So we get through that year. It's April-ish. Or maybe it was before April, actually. we had some traveling people come through our city, and this couple, I really felt led by the Lord that I needed to take them to lunch and just talk to them about just some burdens that I've had on my heart. Specifically, one was that I was really missing little children. The community that I was in, there were not a lot of little children, and the university that I taught at, no little children, and I was just missing like the holding babies and loving on little ones. And so I had these people for lunch, and I was like, I don't understand why I'm here where the Lord's called me to be, but I still have this like, void in my heart. And why is that? I don't understand. Like, this should be amazing. I shouldn't feel this way. And so the woman, Joan and Philip were their names, and Joan said, Melodie, I have a friend in another part of China, and maybe you could go and visit her. And she works with orphans and little children, and maybe you could go and volunteer at her house. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is perfect. This is what I need. I need like little kids. I can go down there for a weekend, kind of get my fix, and then come back to Wuhan, and it'll be great. And so she sent me the email for the lady, and I emailed her, and she told me this lady was from the Netherlands. And so, you can email her and see if she has any time that you can come. So I emailed the woman from the Netherlands, and we emailed back and forth for a little bit. And I found a time in my schedule where I could go down there. My friend Kirk was going to come with me because he had been a social worker in America, and he really wanted to see like social work in China. What did that look like? So we took this 17-hour train down to Guiyang. And at that time in China, there was no fast train from Wuhan to Guiyang. So that's why it was 17 hours. And it was overnight. And we had these like third top tier beds, like one on each side. It was really awesome. So still have really awesome memories from those kind of trains in China. I love them so much. It's like when you go to sleep, it's kind of rocking you to sleep. It's awesome. But we got there, and we got off the train, and Kirk had asked me all these questions like, oh, Melodie, what's it, what kind of kids do they have? Boys, girls, how old are they? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't really ask any questions. I just knew I was going to go help this lady that had some orphans. And he was like, you don't know anything about them? And I was like, no, I didn't really care. I just was going to go and help them. So he was like, okay. So we get there, and the lady meets us, and she's like, come on, we have to hurry. We're in a rush, and we're in a sea of Chinese people. And then there's like one little white-haired lady. So you couldn't miss it. In Wuhan, you could see some foreigners there. But in Guiyang, there were no other foreigners except for Kirk and I and this little lady that we saw at the train station. So she brought us over to her car. We hopped in the car. There was a foreign guy and a Chinese child, and then this woman's husband. And I was like, what's going on here? And she was like, oh, this man just adopted this boy, and this is my husband, and we're taking them and dropping them off, and then we're going back to our house. And I was like, what are we in the middle of? What have we arrived upon? And so it was very incredible. But they were driving their own cars in Wuhan. I either had to take a taxi or a bus, or but I didn't have any friends that had cars, so they had their own car, and we got to drive, and we just kept driving and driving. And I thought, oh my goodness, where are we going? And they lived in this little village. You could tell, definitely different than the big city. And we get to the little village and go through these really narrow, tiny, narrow roads to get to their home. And we get there, and it's pretty much dark, and we're walking inside. And Kirk said, okay, tell me about the kids. And she was like, oh, they all have the Downs. And I was like, excuse me? And she's like, they all have the Down syndrome. And I was like, they all have Down syndrome? And she's like, oh, well, not one. One is, and her English wasn't great. So she was trying to explain to me, and cerebral palsy. And I was like, oh, okay. And Kirk was like, you didn't tell me they had special needs. And I was like, I didn't know they had special needs. And I was thinking, what have we gotten ourselves into? Like, I don't know what to do with kids with special needs. And Kirk was like, well, it's okay. I'm willing to try anything. And I was like, okay, well, me too. And so here we go into the house. And the lady was so funny. Of course, she doesn't know us at all, but she's like, Kirk, well, no boys and girls together. Kirk, you're going to stay up here on this floor. And Melodie, you're going to stay down here on this bottom floor. And And when you're with the kids, you're not together. You're going to be with the big kids, and Melody, you're going to be with the babies. And I was like, okay, man, this is very strict. And but I didn't care. She said babies, and I was excited. I'm like, babies, sign me up. Where are they? And so she brought me in this little room, and the room was very small, maybe like 8 by 8, just like very, very small, and 4 little baby beds. And there were 4 babies in there. And she said, and there was like a tiny little spot in the middle, and with a mat on the floor. And it was in the very first week of May. And so it was not hot at all. The mountains were beautiful. There were mountains everywhere. And so the climate was kind of like, if you're an American, kind of like Oregon or Washington. It was a little bit damp, beautiful mountains, beautiful trees. And she said, okay, you stay in here and just take care of the babies. And I was like, they're all in the bed. There's 4 of them. What do you want me to do? Like, do they need anything special? I mean, I didn't know anything. I had no idea. Give me a neurotypical child and I could, do anything it needed from birth till grown up. I didn't have a problem, but I had zero experience with children with disabilities, except for my tiny little time in public school where they had come into my classroom, I had taught them music, and then they left. And my sweet little Sunday school student, Martha, who had been in my Sunday school class from the time she was 2 years old up until she graduated out of my class. But I just didn't have real experience with babies with disabilities. And I'll never forget, Mariana said, just love them. They just need you to love them. I was like, okay, I can do that. So I picked them up one by one, and she told me their names, and they just smiled at me and loved on me, and I just loved on them back. And, we just played and played. I took them all out of the beds, and she would come and check on me. And then at dinner time, one of the Chinese ladies would come and help me feed them a bottle or feed them some food. And then we laid them down for bed, and I went to have dinner. And that was the first time I saw Kirk again at dinner. And I was like, well, what were you doing? What were those kids like? And he was like, oh my gosh, they're bouncing off the walls up there. We were doing this and that and the other, and they're all girls except one little boy. And we had the best time talking about, what his group was like, what my group is like. So after dinner, she took me up to see those kids and what they were like. I got to meet them, and then we went to bed. And the next day we got up and helped her again in our separate spots. And as the day went on, Mariana came and found me and was just talking with me. And she said, Melodie, you're the one that God has sent. I've prayed and prayed for God to send me somebody to love the children and help me. And it's you. You're the one. And I was thinking, lady, we just met. You don't even know me. It's not me. I'm not the one. I don't even know what to do with these kids. I mean, I'm just loving them. That's all. This is not, I don't have any skills for this. And she looked at me with the strangest look, and she was like, you don't need any skills. You just need to love them. God will do the rest. You're the one that God has called to come with me and do this. Again, I was just laughing hysterically in my mind, thinking, she is so wrong. It's not me. And so we wrapped up our conversation, and I continued to play with the babies. And one more night, and the next morning we were having to leave. We had a very short time there. It was like a 2-day holiday that we had from our teaching jobs. But because the train was so long, we could only stay there for 2 days because we had to travel for 2 days. So before we left, we, said goodbye to the kids. And it was a sad goodbye. We had already fallen in love with them. They were so sweet. And she took us to the train station. And I was like, okay, I'm going to come back and volunteer at your house. Like, I want to get on a schedule. I can come back every few months and help you and volunteer. And I had so much fun. It was so great. And she said, no, did you remember what I said? God called you to come here and live here. I know he's going to tell you. And I took her on her arms. I said, Mariana, you're a saint. I can't do this. I can't move here and do this. There's no foreigners. I don't have a clue how to speak to these people. And I can't live here. But I love you, and I will come back and help you. I promise. And she hugged me, and she said, I'll wait for your call. And I thought, should be waiting a long time, because there's no way. I can't do this. This is not what I'm prepared for. Like, God didn't want me to do this. God wants me to live in Wuhan, teach English, have Bible studies, you know, that's what my life looks like. So we get on the train, Kirk and I were just kind of like talking back and forth about our time and, debrief. This is what it was like. Whoa, this was awesome. Wow, this is really hard. Can you believe this is where they live and all these things? And so then, we take off on the train and we're a few hours in, and I just start feeling this huge weight from the Lord and just this heaviness of, Melodie, that's where you're supposed to be. That's your home. That's where I want you to be. And I was like, no, sir, that is not where I'm going to live. I'm going to live in Wuhan. That's like Texas. That's what you prepared me for my whole life. Wuhan is my home. I love it. I love my people there. I love my community there. I love my students. I love everything about it. I can't think of one thing that I don't love about it. I was loving it. I was tutoring this guy who was like the head of Coca-Cola, and my teaching partners were like giving me side gigs, and I was able to share with so many people. I just thought, like, this is it. There's really nothing else I could ever want except little children, and I can go down there and get my fix and then come back. And I was writing in my journal, Lord, I cannot do this. This is not where you want me to be. And so clearly, I just started weeping. And the Lord said, Melodie, you can be obedient to me and move to Wuhan, and I'll bless your life. Or you can be disobedient to me and stay in Wuhan. And I was thinking, what? You're going to make me choose? You're going to tell me that one is obedience and one is disobedience? Here I have come. I've waited all these years to be where I thought that you wanted me to be, right here in China. And you're asking me to answer the call that looks completely different than what I ever imagined. And as I was just weeping, Kirk at one point said, Melodie, are you okay? What is wrong? It's like, I'm fine. Don't talk to me. I'm fine. I'm fine. And I'm just writing in my journal, Lord, I don't know how I can do this. I don't know how I can say yes to this. It's too hard. There's no friends. I need friends. I need people. What am I going to do? Obedience, disobedience. It's your choice. And I could hear the train. We were getting close to Wuhan, and I knew that I knew I didn't want to live in disobedience. I knew that I wanted to be obedient to the Lord, and that I was not expecting the Lord was going to ask me to live out my life this way. And was I going to surrender it? Was I going to lay it all down? And I wrote, yes, Lord, I'll go. I'll do what you've called me to do. And I was so somber. Got off the train. Kirk is like, oh my goodness. We get out of the train station, and he was like, are you going to be all right? I was like, yep, I am. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to move to Guayana. And Kirk was like, what? No, you're not. You cannot move to Guayana. Melodie, bad idea. No, don't do that. And I'm like, well, that's what God told me to do on the train. I know that I have to go. And we were walking into one of our friends' birthday parties. We had just come straight from the train station, and we were walking into a birthday party, and they're like, oh, guys, how was it? Was it a great time in Guayana? Did you have fun? And I was like, yep, had fun. I got to move there. That's what God told me to do. And they were like, Melodie, you already signed your contract to come back to the university. What? Hold on. What's going on? And it was rough. It was really rough. And I spent the next month declining my contract, finishing out my school year, having a very hard conversation with my parents, especially my dad, who was so excited that when I got to China, I was going to have a job. I was not going to need to raise support. I was going to have support because my job was going to support me. And I thought, okay, it's going to be fine. My parents were so supportive and said, if this is what the Lord's calling you to, then this is what he's going to provide. He's going to provide for your every need. And I had some money saved up that I could use to move my stuff to Guayana. By the end of June, I packed up my life in Wuhan and put my stuff on a truck and sent it to Guiyang and moved my life down there. And this part of my story starts a totally different direction. The Lord totally pivoted what I felt or what I thought my life was going to be like. So the next podcast will be the next part of my story. So thank you so much for being with us today.